Sorry. Middle of eating. Kind of curious how are there people that aren't members in here? Yeah. Oh, it's went public, that's why. Oh, shit. How did that happen? Whoops. Give me a minute here. I don't know what happened. If it's public, I can't rant about stuff that the public shouldn't hear. But let's decide. Here, my fate's in your hands. Oh, shit, coaster. I can't rant about the Broken Sword channel anymore. No. Is it still public? I'm sure I just made it. It's a bit of a false start here, folks, but sure you don't mind. Right, so it's hidden now. Right, okay. There's like 15 people here or something. And I've made it unlisted again, so you've all snuck in the back door. But so you know, these kind of streams aren't like they're not like the normal ones. There's a lot of talking about stuff that's not really talked about in the regular ones, so you might find it boring and you might leave. But it is like public ones in terms of being able to ask questions or leave comments and all of that. You feel free to do that. And yeah, we'll just go with it then with whoever's here. But try not to share the link. If suddenly like 50 people are watching, then it's not really a members one anymore. I don't have that many members. Okay. So yeah, feel free to stay. And yeah, Ben, you're saying, I noticed this as well. It was up, and then I made the one that was up. I made I put that to unlisted, but then it seems that when I went live, it's went back to public again. So, oh well. So yeah, what we usually do here, yeah, way too many people. They don't usually get 15 people for member ones. It's well, I was tempted just to make it public then and just have as many people join as they want. But a third of people don't want this one to be public. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is usually, yeah. Let's just make it public then, eh? Why not? Give me 1 second, I'll just sort it. Sorry for the quiet, I'm just sorting out the video, just making it public. So, like I said, a bit of a false start, so I've made it public, but I'll restart basically, so back. Right, so we're back again. I'm kind of trying to change the thumbnail so it doesn't look like a members one. And there you go. It's like it never happened. Okay. Right. So I think I should just explain. This was supposed to be the monthly member stream. For some weird technical reason, it went public, and I put it back to private and then just made it public again. So absolutely nothing's prepared for this. So I've got one member question for the member stream and no other questions. So I don't even know what I'll talk about. But hello to all the members and non-members. And if you get any questions, anything you want to ask, if you want to talk about Rings of Power, if you want, whatever you want to talk about. But as I said, this was meant to be a members one, so I've not. Usually for the public ones, I get a big pile of questions and I get prepared that way, but I'm very unprepared for this one, so it might be incredibly awkward. So let's see, what have I got already? Just trying to get myself organized here. Right, hold on. So comments. You said it first, Rings of Power. Well, that's the thing, right? I don't make Rings of Power videos or anything, but I don't mind if people ask about it because I do have thoughts. I just don't make videos. But if people are interested in that stuff, no, it doesn't bother me. And it's kind of like the only time that I get to really talk about it. So I don't have a problem. I don't dislike people that like Rings of Power or anything like that, just because I don't like it. I'm not one of those weirdos that says if you like it, you're desecrating Tolkien or something like that. You can like whatever you like. But there are quite a few weirdos when it comes to it where if you don't like it, they seem to think you're like a horrible person or you're a gatekeeper or some weird reasons you're not allowed to not like it. There's some horrible reasons that you don't like it instead of ones that I think are pretty sound, to be honest. So don't listen to Sarah here. If you want to talk about Rings of Power, feel free. As long as the whole stream's not about Rings of Power, that would absolutely suck for everyone involved. And unfortunately, BB Catcher, I've not watched the new trailer. I didn't even know there was a new trailer. So I can't say anything about it. The only stuff I've seen for Rings of Power are like stills, and there was something in a magazine where I was writing a video, not about Rings of Power, but it was going to mention it because something I was working on, well, I'm working on, is what I think is a huge misconception, which is who the Rings of Power were made for. And it seems, this is like anecdotal, like I don't have evidence for this really, but I think most people think that the rings were made for elves, men, and dwarves. And that's not the case. But I think most people believe that. So I was making a video because I was kind of influenced by it, because the Rings of Power released some like stills of, it seems like season 2 or whatever is going to involve dwarves and their rings or something like that. It seemed that was the case. And they did that thing that Peter Jackson did in the movies, where they made the rings that the dwarves had look like they were made for dwarves. Like the actual look of the rings, like aesthetically. And it seemed that they're doing that in Rings of Power as well. So I was just thinking, well, I want to make a video to say that's not the case. And that's the only thing I've really seen from Rings of Power. It seems like in season 2, they're going to focus on that. And that's a huge misconception. I don't know, like when I was making I'm writing the video out, but I don't know if Peter Jackson did it to just simplify the story, because the prologue couldn't be an hour long. So he just immediately starts by saying 3 for the elves and 7 for dwarves, 9 for men. And they go with that. And then that makes me wonder if he and the other writers read the text wrong, or if they were just simplifying the story. And then it makes me think the Rings of Power writers, who are so influenced by Peter Jackson's movies, do they say that because they also don't know, or have they misread the text as well? So I can't really answer that, but I kind of talk about that stuff. So can I give my opinion on the new trailer? No, I've not watched it. But the only thing I know about the new series is Sauron looks stupid. His hair's even worse than mine. And the dwarf rings look like rings made for dwarves, which isn't the case. But anyway, I've talked about that for about 10 minutes. I'll shut up there. And what is this? There's a comment from me. Did somebody change their name to be me? I am a regular viewer of this show. I can't see that in the comments. Has that been deleted? Anyway, yeah, don't do that. No. Make a video on why you won't make a video on Rings of Power. Well, my reasons are really, really boring for not making it. I'm honestly just not really into it. I don't get any what would you call it? Like, when I'm writing a video, if it's about Rings of Power, I just find it really boring, and I don't have very many nice things to say about it, but I also don't want to make a video where it just, I'm grumpy and Scottish, so I can certainly rant for about 3 hours about it, but I don't really want to. And, I remember a channel, does anyone here, it's still around, but it sucks now, but does anyone remember Cinemassacre? Like the angry video game nerd and that kind of stuff. And I remember he made a video saying he was refusing to make a video on, I think it was Ghostbusters, the all-female Ghostbusters one, and he kind of got slated for it, and people still make fun of him for it, and I don't really want to do that. Like, making a video about why I won't cover something, I prefer to just talk about it here, like in these kind of streams. And if people want my opinion on Rings of Power, I'll certainly give it. Why I don't like it and what I didn't like, you can tell me what you liked. That's fine. I think we did that on for the first season. I did a stream that was just about Rings of Power, and people still complained about that when I made one video that was a live stream about Rings of Power, and I still had people saying that I was not a true Tolkien fan and all that shite. But this dude still exists. Yeah. I don't do very much, but I'm still around. I made a new channel with this name and then went back to this channel and changed it to this name and didn't tell anyone. So I'm not the smartest when it comes to YouTube stuff and trying to get bigger and that. I don't seem to really make a good effort when it comes to that. And let's see. First question. I always ask if you're Turkish, but you never seem to answer. I'd like a definitive answer. Are you actually Turkish? Because your name really looks Turkish. Let's see. Tolkien says that the duration rings took to corrupt the Nazgul was based on the good. Yes, he's Turkish. That's good. Corrupt the Nazgul was based on the good or ill will of the bearer. Do you think the Witch King was a deceived, good-hearted character or one that fully embraced bad? Yeah, maybe you did answer. I just don't remember. So I was only kind of kidding about needing an answer right now. So this question is completely subjective. We don't know. And don't listen to all those people that tell you who they know who the Witch King is, or the Lord of the Nazgul, as he's really called. He's never called Witch King in Lord of the Rings, as in the books. But you have these people that say, oh, he was a king of Numenor and that kind of thing. We don't know who he was. But if you're asking for my opinion here, it's definitely the latter. I think the Witch King, as the greatest of the Ringwraiths, greater than all the others in all ways, as Tolkien says, I think he would have been someone who wasn't very good to start with. And, as you say, fully embraced bad. Because, well, there's these quotes about what the Ringwraiths became. So, and people debate this all the time. They'll say some people think they were all kings, and then you always get people that come out and say, well, actually, they became kings, warriors, and sorcerers. But then there's letters from Tolkien where it actually does say the kings, or those wicked kings who became the Ringwraiths. So it's not really known exactly what position they all had before. But I suspect that this figure we call the Witch King didn't just learn all of his sorcery when he became a corrupted servant of Sauron. I think he would have been someone with a bit of some sort of power before, as far as a man can do that. And yeah, someone bad who grew into a greater position through having the ring. And someone who fully embraced that bad, as you say, would probably rise quicker and under Sauron. You know, a bit like the mouth of Sauron. I wouldn't think at all that he was some good-hearted character that was corrupted. He seems like he was an evil bastard before, and that's how he's able to rise up the ranks. If you are already corrupted in some way, it would seem logical that you would achieve more under Sauron. But again, we don't know. We don't know. But if there's any of these ring wraiths that I would say was already bad, I'd say it was him. But you also have that, if someone told me, well, it makes it even more tragic if it was someone good that fell. But, you know, I don't suspect, personally I'm saying, I don't suspect that any of the men that Sauron gave a ring to was good. I don't think so. It was probably ambitious men, greedy men, maybe men that, we don't know what he said when he gave them the rings or whatever, but maybe with some of them he was telling them that it would avoid death, which he was kind of right about. He wasn't really lying there, was he? He just didn't, it's like a monkey paw thing, didn't tell them what that actually meant. But it's probably men that were either in positions of power and were quite willing to take more power, because those are always the men that would, that's what men in power always want, more power, or men who could slip into positions of power through using these rings. So I think they were all probably bad in some way. Nicholas, I'm curious about what people think of Amazon's Gil-galad, why they've made him so off-putting. It's kind of par for the course, isn't it, though? It's... well, not all of them, but it's quite a few of the characters are off-putting. You know, it's... they made Galadriel quite off-putting, and I don't know if this is their attempt to write this strong female character thing, and it gets taken quite literal, where it's not a strongly written character, it's a character that's always right and combative and all this. And it's almost like, are they making her like that so that later you can actually like her? Something will happen, her character will change, and she'll be very likable later. I don't know, but she's definitely not likable from the season I watched. But it's almost like they have Gil-galad as some authority over Galadriel that is a challenge to her, and that makes him, you know, very unlikable. And it's such a strange decision, because we don't know a lot about Gil-galad. But as I said in my video about the downfall of Numenor, that really long one where I was going through all I was going through the actual downfall, going through each king and all of that. Gil-galad's there like the whole time, like through the history of Numenor. Remember, he's Second Age, he's still around, and he survives till the end of it. Well, you know what I mean, like up until just the end. And it's like, he's this symbol of what the Numenorians crave, and this elvish longevity, the serial longevity that we call immortality. And I like that. He's this kind of symbol of it. All these kings keep passing, and it's like, and then this king meets Gil-galad, and then this king meets Gil-galad, and he's just always there. And he's in Middle-earth, you know, trying to hold back the tide, and then there's the conflict with Sauron and everything. And I just always think he'd be quite a likable character if Tolkien wrote more about him. he's meant to be an honourable, noble figure, and joins up with Elendil as Sauron's enemies in the Second Age. Everything just seems like he would be a really great figure. If a bit more detail about him, you're not meant to think he's arrogant and off-putting, but they've went with that in the show. I didn't like him either, and there's some really strange choices they've made where, remember when he sends, it's like a reward or something, he's like, you can go back over the sea to Valinor. I'm like, why are you making that decision? And it's, they're not even, like, having Gil-galad boss Galadriel around is just really weird to me as well. But anyway, I agree with you, he is off-putting, but there weren't very many likable characters, to be honest. I thought Elrond was okay. But yeah, they're kind of writing all these figures with authority as kind of douchebags. Shills, well, let's not start that, but I've seen some pearl clutching from the few remaining shells that maybe season 2 will be better. Well, like I said, if people like it, that's fine, but will season 2 be better? I don't know, because what would make it better? If you've already started something and it's, you're building on a foundation of sand or whatever, will it ever get better? Like season 1, I really didn't like season 1. I thought it was a slog and there's so much wrong with it. So it's like, if they're doing season 2, are they going to like course correct, or are they building on top of 1? But it wouldn't be the first show ever that season 1 was a bit wobbly and then it gets better. There's loads of shows like that. But you just don't know, do you? I don't think I'll watch it though, but maybe eventually curiosity will get the better of me and I'll see it. But I think what they'll believe the general audience will want more of will be like battles, spectacle. And like I said, I've not seen the trailer or anything, but I know that there's like the actual Rings of Power are going to play more of a part here. But I remember what they were doing with that in the first season. I don't know how they're going to handle what the rings actually do. That's an interesting thing to think of. Like the way they made the rings, I remember that. That was like the last episode of the episode before. It was near the end, and they kind of rushed making the rings, and they made them in the wrong order. They made the 3 first, and Celebrimbor, the greatest smith, arguably since Feanor, had to be told what an alloy was. That's something. That's like telling me as a software engineer what a compiler is or something like that. It's just, that was mental to me that they did that. And they explained what an alloy was, and then they just literally forged rings. I'm like, way to take all the magic out of it, And if they're using rings in season 2, what are they going to do? I don't think these writers will have any subtlety with that. I wonder if they'll go the Jackson route of wearing a ring of power will actually make you powerful or something like that. Like, are they going to become warriors or something like this? I have no idea. But like I said, maybe curiosity will get the better of me and I'll watch it when it's all out, but who knows? This, Jesus, how far back I am. The 16 rings were made for the elves, weren't they? Yeah. Well, it'd be 19, wouldn't it, if you're including the 3? And, you know, this is interesting because I was going to talk about this in the members only one, but a video I'm writing was about this misconception about who the rings were made for. And I'm like, they were all made for elves. And there's a curious thing, though, with the 7 rings, called the 7 because they later went to dwarves, right? But there's a couple of passages that are a bit strange when it comes to that. You have the appendices that say that the dwarves themselves, or Durin's folk, believe that Celebrimbor gave them the first of those rings that became the 7 personally, and it wasn't Sauron. But that's always said in the tradition of the dwarves, almost like how do you say it? Like, we weren't tricked, we weren't corrupted, we're not like the rest of them. No, it could just be a tale that they tell. So that ring that they say, the Ring of Thror, right? It's like they always say, oh, that was given to us by Celebrimbor. But then that might not be true. But then you have this other part where in Unfinished Tales, if you read it, it's like Sauron went to Eregion to claim the rings, like all of them. And he apparently found the lesser works, so we can assume those are lesser rings. And he found the 9 rings, it says, but then he couldn't find others. And then he says he had to then torture Celebrimbor. And then he said where the 7 had been bestowed and wouldn't give up the 3. And I found that quite interesting because that bestowed part, if you take that like in modern usage of that word, that means like where they were given. You know, I bestow unto you. Like, it's like something that is offered and given. And that kind of implies that Celebrimbor had already given away all the 7 rings. Kind of. You could read it that way, right? And I'm like, well, that's weird. Does that mean that they did make the rings for dwarves? But then Tolkien often uses archaic meanings for words. And bestowed actually means stored, like where they were kept. And it could just mean that those 7 rings weren't in Eregion, or they might have been Lindon or something like that. They might have been just somewhere else, and Sauron could then go and get them from there. So you're actually left like, well, what happened? What does it mean? And then you have to maybe take other texts where it's more clear about he gathered the 7 and the 9. But that's when I was writing that video, I'm like, that's weird because someone could take that text and maybe convince me that even though Sauron went to Eregion to get the elves to make these rings so that he could ensnare them, and there's very, very elvish motives for the forging of these rings. Okay, like it's such a huge deal. I don't really want to talk about it now because I might talk about it for about 20 minutes, but the elves had elvish motives for forging these great rings, and Sauron knew it, and that's how he was able to corrupt them. It wasn't like, so we think, it wasn't like he went there saying, I want to govern the will of each race, a bit like the Peter Jackson intro says, and I'm going to get them to forge the rings for elves, men, and dwarves. That wasn't it. But he went there and he's understanding that at that point in the Second Age, these elves had refused to go back west, even though they were allowed to. And it's because they had grown to love Middle-earth and their position in it, as in a higher caste, as Tolkien says. They were lords of elves. They were great among the elves. And if they did return west, they would be just elves in Valinor or Tolaresia, wherever they would go. And they didn't want that. So they wanted to hold their position, but they were melancholic about it being a mortal land that would change over time. And that's what they were really making these rings for. It was to stop time, or stop time as much as they could, which would actually be stretching time till it seems like it's stopped. A bit like Bilbo talking about the butter over too much bread. Imagine that bread was a 2,000-mile long sub, right? That's what we're kind of talking about. It was stretching it so that to a mortal's perception, it's never ending. So Sauron knew all this, and the elves didn't want decay, didn't want change. They basically wanted their nature as elves to be the nature of the land itself, essentially turning it into a Valinor in Middle-earth. So this idea that some of these rings were then forged for dwarves doesn't make much sense to me if you take the motives for the creation of the rings in the first place. It's completely tied up with what elves want. So even if I could be convinced that for some reason Celebrimbor wanted to give the rings to the dwarves, it doesn't tie in with why the elves are making the rings in the first place, unless this was to spread this across Middle-earth. And that's another theory, right? Where maybe Celebrimbor, because he was friendly with the dwarves, was like, well, I'll give them the rings, and then this won't just be elvish lands that are in eternal bliss. It'll be further spread across Middle-earth, or something like that. That's if we're going with this idea that Celebrimbor did give out the 7, which I still don't really believe, but I could be convinced. So that's why that video is not out, because I don't even know my own thoughts on it yet, because when I kind of took those quotes all together, it really made me question everything that I always correct people on, where I'm saying they were all made for elves, and I still kind of think they are, but there's something really interesting about those 7 where you could honestly take those quotes and make a good case that Celebrimbor, even through the influence of Sauron, had a plan himself where he's like, well, I'm making loads of these rings and I'll give some to the dwarves. Like it was his idea and not Sauron's, you know? But anyway, I think I've said enough about that. The movie said given to the elves, dwarves. Hold on. It says it began with the forging of the great rings. 3, does it say given? Let's see. Let's get to the bottom of this. Holy shit. Okay. Yes, but listen to this, right? It says, it began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given, as you say, right? to the elves, immortal, wisest and fairest of all beings. Implying straight away that the 3 are a part of the other group, which they aren't, right? But anyway, 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners, and craftsmen of the mountain halls. 9 rings were gifted to the race of men who above all desire power, okay? But this is the kicker, right? It says, for within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race. but they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. So that's implying that the motive for the rings was to govern each race, and they were all deceived because the one was made. But the one was made when only the elves apparently had the rings, unless this thing I was saying about the dwarves is true. But no men had the rings. And that's probably another argument I would make for maybe it not being the case, because if rings were made for all the races, why would Sauron put on the one ring before they'd all been given the rings? Because we know for a fact that at that time when Sauron put on the one ring, that men didn't have theirs. So it makes no sense. Why would he immediately try and do that before all those races that he wanted to govern had the rings? That makes no sense. But why did Miriel decide to die? I know she was spent in the birth of Feanor, but wouldn't she want to hang on to watch him grow? Couldn't she eventually heal? That's the whole point, though. If we're saying that she was spent, it's utterly spent in her spirit. So it's not about she didn't want to watch Feanor grow. It's the tragedy is that she couldn't watch him grow because she was utterly spent. She wasn't healing in Valinor from it. It's shocking that she ends up dying, but it seems unavoidable. Like if an elf dies this way, it's something shocking has happened, because it's like unnatural. They shouldn't be separated that way, like their spirit and their body. So the fact that she did in Valinor after something great like giving birth to Feanor shows just how low she was, and how she just couldn't have the strength to continue. So would she eventually heal? Well, couldn't she eventually heal? Do you mean in her body? Well, no. She reached that point where her spirit left it. It's, I'm not meaning that Miriel just decided at that moment, okay, that's me, and she left. No, she's essentially dying to us, and it may have been out of her control, but it reached the stage where she couldn't continue. But if we're talking about like healing later, well, as a spirit, she does, because there's a lot of stuff to do with Finwë and Miriel where eventually she does want to return to life. Because remember, she utterly refuses, and that's what allows Finwë to remarry. And it's because, as I said in a video about that, I can't remember which one, I think it's the upbringing of Feanor 1, yeah, it will be that, where Finwë is allowed to remarry because Miriel has declared that she never wants to return to life, and she wants to stay in the halls as a spirit, which essentially means she is dead. That's what Tolkien writes. Her declaring that she's never going to return means she is dead. She's never going to be reunited with Finwë in life, and that means that he can't just wander himself forever, so he's allowed to remarry the statute of Finwë and Miriel. But Tolkien does say later that she does change her mind when Finwë is killed as well, and she does want to return, and that's all very interesting. I should probably, I'll say it the first time in the stream, I should probably make a video about that. Interesting thought here. I think Galadriel is so off-putting is because they're trying to tell Feanor's story through her. imagine them actually trying to do Feanor. I don't think they'd be able to do his story any justice. You get all the people saying Feanor did nothing wrong, all that kind of thing. I think if these writers attempted Feanor, it would be he's clearly horrible and evil, and everyone should hate him. I think that's how they would write him. But yeah, she's definitely got that rebellious kind of streak. And I think the most annoying thing is they keep on saying, "But this is young Galadriel." She's not. It's an 80-year-old is younger than a 100-year-old. You wouldn't say they were young, would you? It's kind of like that. She's still, she's been in Middle Earth for ages, and I say ages as in years and years, not actual Middle Earth ages. But young Galadriel, she's not really. She shouldn't be acting like a teenager in the Second Age. Second Age is a big period of growth and everything. There's the whole not returning west and being with Celeborn and leaving Eregion and having her own realm and everything. There's loads of cool stuff they could do with Galadriel to have her grow as a character. But yeah, I thought in season 1 she was pretty poorly written, but they'll wear. It's I think the female characters that had like power and authority, I don't think they were written very, very well. Again, am I only going to say that I actually quite liked Elrond and I didn't really like anyone else? And the guy that plays Sauron, he looks like he should be in Peaky Blinders. He doesn't look like Sauron to me. Ambitious, maybe, rather than evil. Almost all kings do things we would regard as evil. This will be about. Oh yeah, that'll be the Witch King. Probably, yeah. It's more like a fall. Your ambition would lead to your demise, your fall, and what would someone like that give up for their ambition? I could buy that. I think I had in the glory days of Korra debates with people about that. With if I don't think the Nine Rings could get handed out again, and I've got reasons for that, but let's say they could. I think I was having debates with people about if men would take them, knowing what happened to the other men who took them, and I still think some would. Maybe thinking they were so strong that they would not fade, or that the power they'd receive for some period of time would be worth what would happen to them later. And it's like, well, I'm still not dead. I'd still be here. That fear of death would be so huge that they would not fear becoming a ringwraith of all things. But yeah, ambition, especially for the race of men. Gil-galad was the most competent High King. Well, he's got a lot in his favour, though. Quite a lot was happening in the First Age. I know the Second Age has its wars and everything, but Gil-galad had if you still think about it this way, it's a far easier time than the High Kings before him. Really, he's not dealing with Morgoth. And he's the worst parts of the Second Age. You would take them over what Fingolfin was dealing with, and Turgon and all these people. It's an absolute horror show. So I'm not surprised he's the most competent, and he lasted a very long time. Like I said, it's like the whole history of Numenor. He's just over in Middle Earth, wanting to meet all the kings. Babylon 5, Highlander, Xena. I didn't watch Xena religiously. I used to, Sunday nights, I'd always watch Simpsons, and it was either Hercules or Xena would be on like before it, and I'd sometimes watch it. It was quite hilarious, but I never watched Babylon 5. And Highlander, I liked the first Highlander film, but I thought the TV show was pretty shite, to be honest. They had the chance to showcase things like dragons, Haradrim, blue wizards, dwarf mansions, Avari, managed kingdoms just in the east of Middle Earth, and they chose to show hobbits to us. Well, I won't rip into them too much, because if they're doing 5 seasons, there's potential for them to show that other stuff. I think they're doing Blue Wizards this season, are they not? They got Kieran Hines, who I think they're saying is one of the Blue Wizards. I think they're throwing everything at the wall and hoping something works. I think they've got Tom Bombadil in it as well. Grim Tom Bombadil being all depressing, the one character who should stick out like a sore thumb. Like, I would honestly respect the hell out of Amazon and the Rings of Power if they had Tom Bombadil in it, just constantly singing and being out of place. Like, if they went full on, we are Tolkien Loremasters, and we know, like, just have Tom Bombadil speaking to not yet confirmed to be Gandalf, and just constantly sing about water lilies and Goldberry and how not Gandalf yet shouldn't care, and all that kind of stuff. And I'd probably watch it if they did that, but they're not. Tom Bombadil's going to be grim and give some sage wisdom, but it's Tom Bombadil. That'll get everyone to watch it. I cringe every time I see some kind of Marvel-like power stance or improbable sword fighting in Rings of Power. Yeah, they'll do that thing all the Marvel films do, where when there's a group of people, they've all got their weapons held, and the camera will go around them. They'll do that, and a bit like that really terrible scene in, I can't remember which Hobbit film it is. Is it the second or third one? Those two kind of blend in, but the one where the White Council shows up at Dol Guldur, and Saruman starts doing cartwheels and that kind of thing. It's that kind of power stance stuff. That was... I might need to go and watch that clip after this, because it's so stupid. Hello. I was wondering, why wasn't the Kingdom of Arnor reestablished after Angmar's fall? Because they were a mess. The kingdoms had split. Arnor had split into 3. One had been conquered. It didn't last long being conquered, but after that, you've got various figures claiming authority over these realms. They diminish, the population decreases, they are spread thin. Some men head back down south to Gondor, and there's no authority figure to properly re-establish Arnor. And the longer that lasted, the less chance it seemed that Arnor would be re-established. It all fell apart into like individual kingdoms first, and then they fell. And defeating Angmar wasn't such a victory that they could return glory to that place that it had long left. Interesting. I want to write a skit with the writers of Rings of Power discussing what audiences liked about the films. Hobbits, but you can't use the word hobbit for legal reasons, and the Rohirrim, but they don't exist yet. I wonder if they're going to, again, you're talking to somebody here who doesn't really know much about Rings of Power, so someone might be able to answer this and say they're going to. But I remember in the first season they were doing Harfoots. That stuff was so crap. But anyway, like those stupid characters and the main Hobbit or Harfoot looked like you use one of those filters to make you change your sex. It was like they just did that with Frodo, and she looked like Frodo. But yeah, I wonder, because they did Harfoots, are they going to bring in Falahides or the Stewards? I guess they would, and there'll be some sort of weird Hobbit conflict between them or something like that. And you're saying the Rohirrim, but they don't exist yet. Remember, we're talking about Rings of Power here. They could make the Rohirrim exist already if they want. They can do it if they want. The timeline's shot. You're going to get the whole downfall of Numenor in about 3 years instead of hundreds and hundreds of years. Hold on, there's a long comment here. Why did Varda treat Saruman lowly when he never showcased evil intention before? If she perceived pride, then why was Saruman allowed as the leader? Oops, have I skipped something here? Oh, I have, sorry. The comments went ahead. Most of the reasons why Saruman turned bad was because being treated lowly compared to Gandalf by the wise after this point. I'll disagree with that, but I'll get to that in a minute. If he was unfit for the position, then why make him the leader? Why did Galadriel try to make Gandalf the head of the council when Saruman is far more fit for a job? I disagree with that as well. So, hold on, let's leave that one up. We don't know what the Valar perceived, but remember, if Manwë would think that Saruman wasn't right for the job, would he have allowed it? But you have to also think that Saruman put himself forward, and he was still right that out of everyone who was going, Saruman too closely actually understood Sauron. So there's the whole great thing about Gandalf being scared to go, which actually means that he should go. He understands the threat and doesn't have the pride of Saruman. But Saruman served the same master that Sauron once did. He understands the devices of Sauron. He probably understands his motives, desires, and thinks that he could lead Sauron's enemies against him as some kind of counter authority or something. And the Valar don't know everything. We can't say they do, because if they did, well, I suppose this starts to get into like Terminator time travel head twist and stuff. If they knew that Gandalf would be the one to actually achieve something, would it be a case of, if they made Gandalf the head of the Order, would things have happened the way they did? Well, no. Gandalf achieves what he does because he's not the head of the Order. He'd have been a very different figure if he was. all Gandalf has to go through everything that he does to then return and be the head. You know, it's one of those things. It's if the Valar knew more than we think they did, maybe it had to be like that Saruman would head the order, but Gandalf would be the least suspicious one if Sauron discovered them and all that. It's Sauron didn't fear Gandalf as Gandalf feared Sauron at this time, you know? And yeah, it's we don't understand the full knowledge and motives of the Valar, but we have the gift of hindsight. I say this in so many videos where it's like, well, why would they trust Saruman? Because look what happened. And it's like, well, yeah, but Saruman has to go to Middle-earth and he has to fall. You know, even if he had that pride and that desire kind of shielded or something, it's like he's volunteered and he was a servant of Aule. And, you know, if you looked at the CVs of these Maiar, Saruman would seem perfect to lead it. So we only say this was a mistake because we know how great Gandalf becomes and what happens to Saruman. And you said, oh, so you're saying, why was he allowed to be leader? Again, like, the Valar have this relationship where, you remember when the trees were killed, or at least dying at this point, and they want the Silmarils to, because the Silmarils could be made without the trees, and they want the Silmarils to then reinvigorate the trees and bring them to life again. And different Valar have a different approach to Feanor, where some have patience, understanding that it's such a huge ask to get the Silmarils. Others seem really impatient and saying, well, the Valar are asking you for it, why are you even hesitating? And they don't force Feanor to give it up. The Valar could have, by force, taken, well, the Silmarils are gone at this point, but you know what I mean? If Feanor actually could have handed over the Silmarils and the Valar were like, well, we're going to take them by force from you, Feanor couldn't stop them. But they didn't do that, because that's kind of not what they like. So with this whole idea with the Astari, Saruman's like, I understand Sauron, I'm wanting to go. And they're going to go, nah. We want to make the guy who's really hesitant to go the leader. That doesn't make much sense. And who else are we going to pick to be the head? So your next point was most of the reasons why Saruman turned bad was because of being treated lowly compared to Gandalf. Yeah, it's written where it's like he's got that bitterness and jealousy, especially when he's coming to Middle-earth and Gandalf gets the Ring of Fire and everything. But Saruman would have had his ambitions, and you know, maybe it's a trait of these creators, the like engineers of, you know, you can be possessive and egotistical, but you're wanting to be more like Aule, who isn't like that. But you know, there's a reason why these, and I've talked about this in the video as well, why these great evils are all associated with making and creation, because you're messing with the materials of the physical world, and that includes the people in it. It's, you know, Saruman has his own motives, and he wants to deal with Sauron in a specific way when he's arrived in Middle-earth. And, you know, as the head of the Astari and higher Valinorean stature, as Tolkien says in Valinor, he would see himself as being an authority over Gandalf. And, you know, these figures that see themselves as wise, which Saruman was at one point. Remember, we see him when he's already falling. He was a wise figure at some point. These figures like Sauron and Saruman, they see themselves as wisest, so others, if they were wise, would agree with them. And if you don't agree with them, then you're clearly not wise. It's kind of a corrupted version of how Gandalf talks about being the oldest and being the most wise. You can say things that others wouldn't understand, and it kind of seems condescending, but in a funny way. But with Saruman and Sauron, it's that they can't comprehend why. A bit like when Saruman is trying to convince Gandalf to join with him so that they could eventually overthrow Sauron, and it's as if we'll both do it, and it'd be wise to do it. Go to Mordor, I'll learn the rest of the ring lore there, and over time we'll be able to overthrow him and everything. He really thinks he's onto something, and Gandalf, being the wise one and refusing him and seeing through it, must just have Saruman like, you're an idiot. And that's the pride that you're talking about as well. But I think it's not just about being treated differently by Gandalf or compared to Gandalf. It's the motives of Saruman can easily lead him into corruption and pride and everything. Gandalf's a completely different, when I say type of being, I just mean he comes from a different place in his understanding of the world than Saruman does. And, maybe, like I said earlier, the Istari had to be shaped that way for things to play out the way they did. It wouldn't have been the same if Gandalf was the head of the Order. It had to be Saruman. He seemed like the logical choice. But, we can't just rewrite the story because we have hindsight. If he was unfit for his position, then why make him the leader? He wasn't unfit, though. I think he was a perfect fit for it. But because of his nature compared to Sauron and everything, but that's, like I said, the Valar are probably thinking if Saruman's more Aule than Sauron, it's a great appointment. But the nature of putting someone like that in that position gives him a huge opportunity to actually fall, which he does. It could have went one way or the other, but for Saruman, he did fall, which, like I just said, that's the potential for the type of being he is and the position he was put in. But it could have worked, but unfortunately didn't. And why did Galadriel try to make Gandalf the head of the council? Yeah, and it's quite funny because we're in opposite positions here. It's like, you think he's unfit for the position of head of the Order. I think he was fit for it, but he fell. And then you think he was more fit for the leader of the White Council. And I think Gandalf's way more suitable for that, and that's because it's not just the Istari that are members of the White Council. There's other figures of power in Middle-earth. I think Gandalf's far more suited. Gandalf's the wanderer. He creates relationships with these other beings. Saruman wasn't a wanderer, and when he was able to get his clutches on his home at Orthanc from Rohan, he remained there and looked down on other beings and everything. I think if you're talking about a White Council of more than just the Istari, Gandalf's far more suitable. And Galadriel clearly liked Gandalf more, and Círdan spotted something in him as well. Maybe it's just that perception they have where they just see this kindness and almost like a hidden power that would come from Gandalf through his time in Middle-earth. Saruman would immediately just show up like, I'm the authority here, and it's Galadriel and others must have just perceived something that those with great perception can perceive. And as Ben says, Saruman was preferred by Gandalf without counsel. Gandalf's got humility, though. He's not got the pride of Saruman. I didn't see this comment. You're kind of... It's weird we're using the same reasoning, but I'm using it to justify why Gandalf would be better, and you're saying for Saruman, which, again, I'm not saying you're wrong, it's just their opinions. But you're seeing it as a weakness that Gandalf wanders around while Saruman's stationary. He's more skilled in political affairs. Arguable. I think Gandalf would be more open politically than Saruman. Saruman would provide his reasoning, and again, like I said earlier, he'd probably be like, well, I'm the authority, I'm the head, I get to, what I say goes. Gandalf seems a bit more open than that. And yes, you are right. Greater knowledge to direct resistance against Sauron through his devices. Saruman, I know Sauron kind of feigned fleeing to go to Mordor and everything, but they do say that it's the devices of Saruman, and that means the plans. People always take that devices to mean that he had cannonballs or something. It's when they say the devices of Saruman, it's like his plan was put in motion to drive the necromancer out. They discovered it was Sauron. I agree with that, what you're saying, but as we see through the actual Lord of the Rings, Gandalf was way better at directing resistance against Sauron because he, funnily enough, grew to understand Sauron's weaknesses more than Saruman did. And the reason for that would be Saruman had the same weaknesses, so he couldn't see them in Sauron. These blind spots that he would have as well. It's a bit like an example of that could be not thinking that someone would destroy the ring. Saruman would not think someone would destroy the ring either, because why would they? Again, he's very similar to Sauron, so you might think, well, that's good to challenge Sauron, but Gandalf comes at it from a different angle and is the better one. And yeah, when he got his... Oh, sorry, I'll read out the comment first. Saruman literally hid in his tower, experimenting and researching, just like the fallen kings of Gondor. Yeah, when Saruman... I think I just mentioned this about 10 minutes ago or something, when he got convinced to be given the keys to Orthanc, I'll be a buffer from your enemies. So it's like Rohan, and then there's Isengard, and there's the Dunlendings, but Saruman will be in Isengard, and it seemed like a good deal. He is really falling to kind of corruption at that time. He's not very sociable with other figures. He's gathering treasures and becomes very knowledgeable about certain things, but it's knowledge over wisdom. I think that I'd probably say something like that in the very first video on the channel, the Saruman Path of Wisdom one. He ends up craving knowledge over wisdom while still thinking that he's wise. Took me almost an hour to say I should make a video about that. Yeah, it's an addiction. I say I should make a new video about it, but then I spend so long writing. I've got like 4 different videos I'm writing, and I can't just finish one and do it. I'm really annoyed about that one with the rings, though, where when I started finding, rediscovering those quotes, I was like, wait, and I'd already written like loads, and I says, oh, am I disagreeing with myself here? And I went back to the drawing board again. But it's very good when I write a video that I just write from start to finish and then record it and I go, this is what I'm doing. But sometimes you go through these periods where you can't just finish one. But I do all that stuff. I say I should make a video about that. I do actually write it down, but when I've said that, I've probably made about 1% of the videos that I say I should make. As this is a semi-public stream, well, it's public. Are we allowed to mention the Council of the Nine Loremasters Tower TM? Yeah, you definitely can if you want. No, I don't want to. I'm not into drama or anything, right? I wouldn't want to say anything where I got invited to that. So for people that don't know, there's a. I used to be on Quora writing. Some of you might remember that, and I've not in years now. But and I'm happy when people invite me to. I don't get invited too much, right? I don't know if I don't play well with others or something, but I don't get invited onto other channels and invited to podcasts or anything like that. Get your little violins out, but it doesn't really happen. But someone messaged wanting me part of some group that was on Quora, and I had never heard of it or anything, but it's nice to be asked, and it means that they like what I do in some way. But when I found out what it was, I started to kind of think, wait, do you actually like what I do? Because it's hard for me to believe that someone likes the stuff I do, but then invites me to do something that is the antithesis of what I do. So those who watch my videos, which I assume is most of you that are here, I'm always going on about my views on canon, like the dreaded canon. And some people don't like that view. They seem to think that it means I think everything goes, like anything goes. When I say I don't really follow a canon, I don't mean the Shadow of Mordor games are up there with Lord of the Rings or something. I don't think that at all. But I don't go out my way to fill in gaps that have you create what fills the gap. And I never ever say something like, well, I don't value that text because it's not in these 3 books or something like that. Especially the amount of people that say that stuff who don't understand how the Silmarillion was put together. And I've had people talk about the tale of Adanel, or like the fall of man and all this great stuff in Morgoth's Ring, which was left out of the Silmarillion because it just didn't fit into the narrative. I've had them deny that text. They've just said, well, I don't care if you quote from that, that's not canon. And that honestly just annoys me. But anyway, this guy invited me to join this group, and that's what they're doing. They're self-proclaimed lore masters and scholars, but they're creating a Tolkien canon, so they say. And I was like, no chance. I'm not interested in that at all. And 1 or 2 people over the last year or whatever have sent me stuff they've written or YouTube videos, because one of them's on YouTube, and they do like council meetings and all that, right? I really think they should wear robes, but I was reading some of the stuff, and again, I don't want, if they ever watch this or something, I'm honestly not meaning to sound really insulting, but I absolutely hated what I was reading. It's when people say stuff about like David Day, for example, I feel sorry for David Day when this kind of stuff's out there. This is 1,000 times worse. It's like making a claim that is no right to be made, really, but then basing an entire argument on that claim. So there's like claims that rely on that claim being true to then make the next claim, and then there's a next claim, and it honestly just gets wacky, and then it starts saying things like RPG stats and all that for figures and stuff, and I was like, what is this? And then at the end it's like declared that what they've said, well, I think one of them was it's official that Morgoth is 30 feet tall, for example, something pointless like that. And through my quote mining and making up stuff about stats, and I now declare it is an official decree that Morgoth's 30 feet tall. And no, for me, just for that example I'm talking about, I'm not saying it's the right way. If you want to get the calculator out and stuff and start working out the heights of characters like that, I view it, I always say I view it like mythologically. And that's why, if someone did a painting of Goliath, for example, I don't really know or want to know what height Goliath really was. I don't think all that stuff happened, right? I'm just saying I don't want to know the height. I just know that Goliath was really tall, taller than a man should be, or something like that. And if you start doing like artwork for David versus Goliath, if you did a sculpture and Goliath was 12 foot tall, which is bigger than any human's ever been, I wouldn't be saying, oh, that's too tall for him. I'd be like, I get what you're doing. It's the perception of someone enormous fighting someone who seems helpless, but they're not, and they actually win. And I kind of view that with like Morgoth, and it's usually the Fingolfin fight they're talking about, where there's artwork out there that's great, where he's about 12 foot tall. And then there's ones where he looks about 100 feet tall, right? When I'm reading the Silmarillion, I don't imagine him that tall, but I like the artwork that shows it because they're trying to show that disparity between the two figures, the hulking kind of godlike figure and the High King seeming a lot smaller, but like pure and everything. And I think that's a great thing to show in artwork. I don't want to know what height he really is, and Tolkien doesn't do that because he's I'm not saying he's got the exact same idea as me, but it's Tolkien would have had a similar kind of mythological view of it. He wouldn't want to just say, Morgoth came out and he was 20 feet tall, because then you don't imagine anything really, do you? It's everyone reading this passage about this hulking black armored figure climbing the stairs of his fortress to do this fight has a different idea of what he looks like, and that's far better than I'm going to scientifically prove that he's 30 feet tall because he steps on Fingolfin's neck, and if his foot proportional to the rest of his body was bigger than this, then he couldn't have stood in his neck. He would have just crushed his body, something like that. That's just sucking all the life and fun out of it. But anyway, the answer to this is yes, you can talk about the Loremasters. There's just something about people calling themselves scholars that rubs me the wrong way. I'll say that. A nice little message here. You'll be long gone now. You sent this half an hour ago. So thank you very much. It's always nice to hear. I don't get very many comments these days. Well, I can't really answer this question, but I've got one thought about it. How would the world, or you, as in me, react if tomorrow we find out the whole of the Silmarillion is actually real life, prehistory? How would that affect society at large, philosophy, religion, etc.? Well, how would we know it was real? There's a lot of things people believe now that I don't think there's proof of, but there's other things we do have proof of that people still don't believe. So, is it a universal thing now that everyone accepts that the Silmarillion is actually real? I don't think it would happen like that. You'd still have people that are like, "No, I don't think so." But because then you have to stretch it further. It's like, are we saying the elves were real and Morgoth was real? Does that then mean Eru's real? How do we prove Eru's real? That's such a... You can tell that I'm not a religious person by my answer to that, but I don't think it would be accepted that, who's saying it's real and how do we prove that it'd be real? If it were real, it'd be pretty frightening, to be honest, because you'd know a figure like Morgoth actually existed, and if what was written in the Silmarillion was actually true about him, I'd be pretty terrified if a figure like that was around or was going to come back, or that Sauron was real, or the orcs existed and all this. I think it'd be... Some people might think, well, this is really cool, elves and dwarves and all that, wizards and stuff. I'm thinking about the other stuff that's actually horrific to think if it was real. And be looking under my bed at night for orcs. Oh yeah, and you've had a little bit more. Artifacts, cave paintings, scripts in the wall, and Angmar mentioning Feanor, Elendil, cave paintings. Well, I'm no anthropologist. I don't know how it would affect society, but if it was confirmed to be real, what's real, right? I know that sounds very Matrix, right? But it's like, if we have these scripts and paintings and all that depicting these events, does that mean the events actually happened, or that the paintings and stuff were just done in the past? Is it any different from Tolkien writing a book about it than having paintings depicting it? They could just still be stories, couldn't they? So I don't really know. But I can't really answer how it would affect society, because how would I know that? They did that X-Files thing too, where about half the episodes related to the central plot and the rest were all random. Yeah, the mythology episodes of the X-Files, which got so out of hand that I completely lost what it was all about. And then you got the Monster of the Week episodes, which they're the best ones. But yeah, and when it comes to Tolkien, though, I'd want the mythology ones to be the ones that would take precedence. You wanted to build up to the big event. But with X-Files, I think it's the other way. I think the Monster Eat ones are way better. Geez, I'm so behind with these comments, but there's not that many. I should probably read comments while I'm answering stuff, because there's a lot of interesting stuff said about things I talked about half an hour ago. Could it have been that Saruman thought he was more an equal to Sauron, thus should have been top? You mean top pick, according to himself? I would go with that. I don't know about equal, maybe, yeah. Like, these figures certainly have pride and ego about them. And like I said earlier, he would definitely think he understood Sauron more and would be in a position to challenge him. But that was definitely not how it went. He was not as great as Sauron and was completely daunted by him through the Silmarils, would say, the Palantir. Almost without knowing that he'd been. I like all that. Well, I more than like. I love all that language Tolkien uses with comparing Isengard to Mordor. That's some of the best descriptions in the book, I think, with a slave kind of model, the child's flattery, that kind of thing. It's almost like he's saying, yeah, it's pretty good, but it's pathetic compared to this thing over here. The mini kind of empire of Isengard from the Tower of Orthanc compared to this behemoth of darkness and Mordor led by the Dark Lord in the Dark Tower, Barad-dûr, and basically telling us, without just spelling it out to us, that Saruman was deceiving himself by thinking that what he had built could compare. And the only way he could really challenge in some way would be to get the ring that the being he wished to replace actually made. It's just, everything he's saying is just that Sauron's greater than Saruman. Despite Saruman still being great, that's just another way of telling us just how great Sauron is. And yeah, I think that Sauron was originally believed the one to be the one of the Astari most capable of understanding Sauron. As it turned out, he understood Sauron all too well. Yeah, I was saying that earlier. He understands him, but he has the same faults as him as well, and he can't see those. And because he shares such a similar nature to him, it's not a surprise that he ends up falling as well. Jesus, boiling in here. Are the comments still working? There's no more comments. Is everyone asleep? A sec. So let's see. What do you think of Saruman being higher in Valinorean stature to Gandalf, despite Gandalf having the greater spirit? as perceived by Círdan and Saruman himself. What do each of these terms mean? Well, you have to also remember that the Ainur, much like elves, men, dwarves, everyone else, they're not just a static being that's the same from beginning to end. There's room for growth. There's room for a rise in greater stature or a fall through diminishment. And it could almost mean that in Valinor, Saruman maybe he achieved great things and was maybe well known and great in his skill and craft. You know, if he's a student of Ali or whatever, I'm not confirming this is the case, but what if he was one of his greatest students? What if he was particularly skilled in certain ways and just considered to be important and, like I say, great? And Gandalf, as we see in The Lord of the Rings and as time passes, he has this sort of hidden power within him. It's not so obvious to see, and it all comes through with pity and mercy and understanding. And, you know, it's almost as if Gandalf, through study and eagerness to learn and understanding in Valinor, applies that in the real world when he goes to Middle Earth. It's actually put into practice. And you know, I know he returns as Gandalf the White, but it's like as if he grows in stature, as he would return to Valinor praised for what he achieved and maybe overcoming some doubt that he had or something like that. It could just be Gandalf proved himself in some other way. The potential was there, the greatness was there, but it had to be demonstrated in a way that was different from how someone like Saruman would demonstrate it. It could be that. But I think Tolkien is basically saying in Valinor, Saruman was considered to be greater, and it could mean at some point in terms of their actual stature as spirits, he was greater. Not all the Ainur are equal. And, you know, Frodo's not the same person at the end of Lord of the Rings as the beginning. Tolkien explicitly does say that his spirit's strengthened. He's actually able to somewhat use the ring in a way that once he's claimed it, if the ringwraiths were there, for example, they wouldn't doubt that Sauron was the Lord of the Rings, but they wouldn't harm Frodo. Frodo claiming it and declaring himself as the Ring Lord would stop the ringwraiths from actually harming him. And that's quite some step, and that's through pain and sacrifice and understand. His whole journey helps him grow, and that could have happened with Gandalf. It happens with someone like Glorfindel, who passes through death and comes out the other side even greater. So it might just mean that at one point Saruman was greater, but he went one way and Gandalf went the other, and Gandalf was far greater in the end. There's so much in this amazing saga. How do you remember, for instance, just the people in Finway's family? Reading the Silmarillion like 25 times something definitely helps, but I think when you start picking out ones that have particular personalities, they become memorable. A lot of people get dismayed with all the the amount of the figures that have F in their names, but you can distinguish from most of them. And then same with the children of Feanor, for example. It's some of them don't have huge roles to play, but other ones definitely do, and they become memorable. And then, if you remember 5 of them for doing certain things, you can certainly just remember the last couple of names. And it's never been hard for me to remember them because they are distinct personalities that have their own stories. And do people get confused between Fingon and Fingolfin? And I don't know how. Their names are very similar, but can you really get confused with what they achieve and what they actually do in the Silmarillion? That's how I don't think their names are similar. Like, there's people that have told me they get confused between Saruman and Sauron, and I'm like, well, I have no idea how. They're completely different characters. And yeah, I never give tips for reading it. I don't think it's that difficult to read, but one thing I would say, there's always stuff that comes with the books, like maps, or you bring up a family tree or something like that, and I think those are pretty good. I've seen loads of great maps for when you get to these Balerian chapters where you're like, where are we? And then you have family trees where if you are confused about Finwë's family, it's not that hard to start to actually draw out. I could draw out his family tree to quite a distance, but reading the text over and over does that, and really understanding the story. But just if someone pops up, really, oh, who's this one now? Tolkien usually says how they're related, but you can always jump to the back of the book as well and go straight to the name, and it'll tell you exactly who they are. And it just starts to become, I could write out Finwë's family tree better than my own one, probably. Did you miss my question? Oh, I need to go back and look. Could you maybe write it out again if I've missed it? Not on purpose. Mm-hmm. How do I interpret technological anachronisms, mostly in the Shire, clocks, barometers, golf, fourth wall breaking jokes, or in universe realities, recovered Numenorian technology, or something like dwarves would make? They talk about their machines and toys and stuff that do things that almost seem kind of magical. And yeah, it's interesting because a lot of this is like Hobbit stuff. Like language that's talking about like a freight train and that kind of thing. We always have to remember that there's different motives for when Tolkien was writing something, and then later changing it, and changing his ideas for the whole Legendarium. Like he was partly rewriting The Hobbit completely to match the tone of The Lord of the Rings, and this sort of stuff was getting taken out. And I kind of see that as if I really wanted to, like, I'm reading it and saying, oh, the mention of a clock is taking me right out of this, right? It doesn't really. But if I wanted to explain it in terms of the Legendarium or something, I would say it's the translation. I always go to it's the translation. It's the translators read something that we might not understand, and he's put it into some way that we would understand. Some some game they're playing or whatever, or some event happening, like it's golf. We know what golf is. It could be something like that. And it's like when people go really in depth about the fox that speaks in the Fellowship of the Ring, and they go way overboard with it about what it means. And I'm like, well, the fox didn't actually talk, and we don't know what the fox was saying, but it's like these little bits that are just added to the story because it is still a story, and I don't mind that stuff. And it's recovered Numenorian technology, dwarf technology, that would all be cool. That would all work for me. Or just things the translators put in for our benefit. A little bit of whimsy or something like that. I don't have a right answer here, but these things never bothered me. But I always just go to if we're bang into it all, it's translated text. A bit like how Sauron wouldn't actually be called that, or all the hobbits have different names from what we're reading. It's all been translated for us, and maybe other things were translated as well. Chat keeps going down at the bottom. Something about sorcery there. I'll find it. I've lost it. I hopefully it comes back. Okay. What do you think of the tale of Adanel as a piece of writing? To me, without exaggeration, one of the most insightful pieces of writing ever written, and different from other things Tolkien wrote. Yes, it's one of my favorite pieces of writing, and it's very underappreciated because of where it's located. As I always say, the Athribeth, Finrod, Andreth is one of my favorites. Tale of Adanel, I love it, and I'll do a video on that. But yeah, I would at least put it up there as one of the greatest things Tolkien wrote, and that's why I'd say everyone should read it. Don't just read Silmarillion, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. The History of Middle-earth isn't just really dry, difficult to read text. There's stories in there, pieces of writing that would have been in the Silmarillion, so they're kind of intact and you can read them. This is one of them, and it's brilliant, as we're getting told here. If the text stops moving here, I could say, because I see the tale as a very deep text with so many layers. It says a lot of things about human nature. If ever there was a biblical fall, I genuinely think it was more like it than Adam. I think, yeah, this is why it's so important as well. It's the fall of man story, and a lot of people think, oh, it kind of messes up when men woke up, or when Melkor went to Middle Earth, because Tolkien started talking about, well, he has to have passed in at this time because he has to corrupt men. And we know that he doesn't corrupt elves in the same way. And I'm not talking about orcs or anything, which I still don't really agree is what happened. But with mankind, I really like that Tolkien wrote a fall where there's still some sympathy. Not all of them fall. And there's that like great part where men try to escape, and then when it's actually quite horrific. The kind of wording of it, it's like they think they've escaped that kind of temple on the hill, and the false god, which is Melkor. But when they think they've escaped and they've went to the coast, and that, it's like their enemy's already there. It's like it's quite scary imagery. It's like they can't escape Melkor and his influence. There's no escape from him. And I think the tale itself is actually a must read for understanding Melkor as well, and this side of him that you might not get so often in the Silmarillion. Because remember the elves, and we don't see Melkor that often after he's escaped his captivity and he's hiding in his fortress. But in this kind of tale, you actually really get to see the level of corruption and pretending to be Eru, and then that twisted way starts to gives men what they want, and then starts to not give them as much, and then doesn't give them anything, but he still demands the worship from that. It's like so debased and corrupt, and you really get that kind of Lucifer feeling from Melkor in this tale. So if you haven't read it, everyone, sort your life out and get it read. And don't wait for me to make a video whenever that'll be, because it won't compare to actually reading it. As I always say, I don't make videos so people don't read Tolkien. I make them so I hope that they do. I don't want to be a replacement for reading Tolkien. Like some channels sum up the stories for you and that, and it's like, just go and read the stories. The stories are way better. Straight into it here. Dislike all the 9 Loremasters, but I especially dislike John Sierra. He's bad for Tolkien fan base. There's one that I was friendly with back on Quora, Sid Kemp. Sid Kemp was always nice, and we used to share answers and all that stuff, and I liked what he wrote. Unfortunately, like all this stuff with the 9 and the Loremasters and all that, I don't agree with any of it, and I like that Sid's still talking about Tolkien and doing his thing, but I vastly preferred when he was just writing his own stuff. I don't like that whole Loremaster thing in general, and I don't know much about John, but as I said, I don't. I just have a thing about folk declaring themselves as scholars. It's just something that really turns me off about that. Turns my stomach. So I'll definitely get Patricia when I find your question. I'll get to it. I'm just trying to catch up here. Give me a second, people. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, I finally found it. Sorry it took so long. I'm still waiting for the tour analysis series. Since you mentioned Valar making decisions without hindsight, do you think Ulmo affected events surrounding Tor because Eru gave him knowledge? That's interesting. I am kind of loath to directly involve Eru in these kind of ways. I don't know what you think about it, but I tend to think Ulmo's interference, if I want to just call it that makes it sound like a bad thing, but remember, we all know he always cares about the children of Eru, but that's in his nature. He never abandoned them, and he never attempts to like violate free will given to men, for example. It's Ulmo's one of these figures who also understands doesn't understand Eru as much as someone like Manwë does, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't understand him. And he'd never interfere with the free will of men, but he definitely inspires. And I think that's through his own nature and not some direct influence by Eru, if you're saying that. So with Tor, we know that he says he set it in his heart to depart from the land of his fathers, for he had chosen him as the instrument of his designs. It's Ulmo has designs that are his own, and you also have to remember he tried it with Turin and it didn't work. Saying that he was to cast down pride in the bridge in Nargothrond. But yeah, like you've asked this question, and I know you're really interested in Tor because you're always trying to. I'm not saying try to get me to do my videos. I said I would, and I haven't touched on this at all. But I'm interested in what you do think about it. Do you think Eru would be so directly involved in it, or is this the nature of Ulmo? I'd rather it was his nature, his relationship with these figures, rather than Ulmo using these figures for his designs, but it's in turn he's been used as the instrument of another design, and that kind of way it makes it almost seem less like he's been influenced to care or something like that. And I don't really think of him that way, but let me. I think you have responded. Give me a sec and I'll find it. I think Ulmo is more connected to the music of the Ainur, and so has innate knowledge of possible events to come. Well, in the Silmarillion, he also knows that something like the doom that was proclaimed for the Noldor couldn't be overcome. But he still wants to help. He still cares in his own way. And I think, not even Namo, free will has to exist. They can't know everything that's going to happen. But I think this innate knowledge you're talking about could be an understanding of, maybe an understanding in some way of the nature of these beings that he cares so much about. If we're told that he cares so much about the children of Iluvatar, I usually take that to mean that he understands them more than other figures, understands their nature, and doesn't just like, oh, I love them and want to help them. He understands their plight and wants to do what he can. But free will is a thing, but there's certain things that can't be overcome, such as the doom that is proclaimed. But I do agree with you there, where it's like he's more connected to the music of the Ainur, and that would be a right thing to say, I think, because he's associated with water. And I've always taken the each Vala who's associated with some aspect of nature was a crucial part in the design of it, and that's why they descended into the world. So if Ulmo is Lord of Waters, Kings of the Sea, and all this, he must have played such a huge part in the creation of that aspect of the world. He must have. And he descends into it, and he's like tied to that. That's he's like got the authority over it because he helped create it. And same with Varda and the stars, and Auli and the earth and all that. And the music of the Ainur is said to be in the waters of the world. We're told this as well. And that could be because Ulmo is associated with it, or it could be water itself because Ulmo helped create it. It could all just be tied together. And so this idea of innate knowledge of possible events, I think you're right to use the word possible there. And I also agree with you that he's very connected to the music. I think all the Aratar are really, really connected to music. They're all these aspects of creation. But maybe Ulmo's isn't just water, it's he ends up gaining some understanding of what he created, which was the children of Iluvatar, which he created without the help of the Ainur. But maybe Ulmo, in a way, like he understood them more than the rest of them did, just like Melkor really didn't understand them compared to the rest. Or maybe I'm even going against one point here. Maybe Melkor really understood men, and that's why he was able to corrupt them, because of all the Valar, he's probably the one that's closest to them, their potential for greatness and their potential for a fall. But anyway, I could talk about this for about half an hour. I hope I've not rambled too much. So I need to go back up here, and you might have missed my Minas Morgul one as well. Yeah, but I have answered about 80 of your questions. I can't answer every single one. Nin's back. Nice to see you. Do I think Feanor's personality had an effect on the Silmarils and how people act and think around them, like how El affected Angmar? Well, okay. Yes, I do. I think we have to take this idea that all great things contain a part of the person that made them. So the Silmarils, it's not just that they couldn't be, like, if they were broken to reinvigorate the trees, Feanor's like, well, I can't make them again. There'll be some people out there that think, well, if the trees are reinvigorated, just use the trees again and make the Silmarils, and it's like, it doesn't work like that. Like, a masterpiece happens once. I know there's 3 Silmarils, but it's kind of implied that they were all made. It's like they're together, the 3 Silmarils. And I do think that an aspect of the creator goes into the creation. And this can be warped and corrupted, like Morgoth with Morgoth Ring, Sauron with the One Ring. And it is kind of how I view, in a kind of less corrupt way, the nature of the 3 rings. Like I said, I think at the beginning of the stream, when I talked for ages about the nature of the rings of power, how it's like elvish nature put into physical objects. Where does that come from? You know, it's Tolkien has these speech and essay on fairy stories where he goes into this idea of elvish art. It's something we can't really understand, and it's like their connection with nature and existence allows them to create art that we can't really create. We don't really understand it, but they're naturally able to do it, and the gifted among them can make incredible pieces of art that seem like magic to us, but Tolkien calls them it's like an enchantment, where it affects the secondary world itself. So these great works of art, elvish art, are so great that they actually have other people perceive the secondary world in the way that the creator who created these objects wanted the secondary world to be perceived. So, you know, when someone's using a ring of power to maintain a perfect land of bliss, is why you'll perceive that perfect land of bliss as well if you're there. And I can't understand how that works. I wouldn't want to understand how that works. But it can't just come from nothing. This idea of will and inspiration, some part of you going into this great desire to create something, and then being able to achieve it, the culmination of your craft. That's what the 3 rings were for Celebrimbor. I don't think he could forge any other rings after that. But it's not in the corrupt, kind of debased way of Sauron, where he's doing it for evil intent. But it must come from somewhere. And if I'm saying that these 3 rings were, it's like the nature of elves put into these objects, was it like some will of Celebrimbor that went into these rings? I don't really know. But I do think there's some aspect of the creator that goes into them. And for Feanor, definitely. He's so bound to them as well. It's not, I'm not saying it's like the rings of power, but possessiveness, it wasn't created to share with the world, which wouldn't have Feanor diminish in some way if they were shared with the world to provide a great masterpiece for everyone to enjoy. He became possessive of it and so bound to it that the idea of them being broken would kill him, basically. And I believe that. I believe that if the Silmarils were forced from Feanor and broken, it probably would have. His spirit may have left his body out of absolute grief and horror at the thought of it. And yeah, if we're talking about swords that apparently talk to people, helms that have magical properties, rings that can stay time, and Silmarils that are so indescribably amazing that a Dark Lord will claim them as his own by rights of being the mightiest being in the world and suffer pain just to have them. There's obviously something really special about them, and it's not coming from nothing. And I think it has to come from the one that's creating them. So, if that's the case, the fact that they are so bound to Feanor, I think in some way would mean potentially that others understanding where they came from, what went into them, may have them act another way, which I suppose could just be the history of them, who's touched them, and all that. That could be an aspect of it, but I tend to, well, if you're saying that's how you view it, I tend to agree. And but there is also the idea that they are essentially something made from pure creativity and goodness. The Silmarils are good; they're a good thing, and maybe Feanor's possessiveness and his kind of descent into corruption would taint them somewhat over time, and maybe that's the case. Or they stayed great forever, and it's the nature of the person that is tainted, as we see with hands burning, touching them and everything. There's a few options there, but again, it's a really good question. I probably could ramble about that for ages. Mm-mm-mm. Hmm. Why wasn't Saruman offered Narya, being the head of the order and whatnot? Well, that's the thing. It's Círdan doesn't give away the ring because it's like, oh, the Astari here, I need to give it away. It's one of these moments that are kind of like we can't really explain it. We always talk about like chance and providence and all this. It's something happened in that moment where when the wizards arrived, Círdan perceived and had the foresight and the wisdom that Gandalf would need the ring and not Saruman. Maybe Círdan couldn't. Well, I know he talks about how Gandalf could use it, but maybe he couldn't perceive himself of that feeling that he had. It's just like he knew it was right to do. And it wasn't that, oh, should I give it to this other one who's the head of your order? It was that it was Gandalf in particular. Maybe even if Círdan wasn't there when they arrived and he met Gandalf later, maybe at that moment he would have given him it because it's the same idea. It's just something's telling me that this person will be able to use this ring and they'll be a guardian for it as well. And it must be a special kind of moment because we talk about like not giving rings away, but I don't think the three really count for that. Like we're talking about being able to not give away a ring of power, but then Círdan does it. I think it's this aspect of their nature that they're not really the same as the other rings. But maybe that's even more evidence that it was something greater than Círdan that was telling him to do that. Where if it was too difficult to give away a ring of power, he quite easily did it because, like I just said, something greater than him's allowing him to perceive that that's the wise choice, which it was. How cool would a Fall of Arnor book be? Like the Fall of Numenor book could be a compilation. It'd be a very short one, it'd be a pamphlet. Fall of Numenor, there's not an awful lot written about it. I wish there was more. It's one of my favourite stories. But there's enough written, and there's room for commentary and references and all this. Fall of Arnor, you're pretty much in the a lot of unfinished tales and that, but appendices territory, and it'd be a lot of made up stuff. But to back up your point there, I wish there was more written about it. I think it's an interesting period of the history as well, and there's surprisingly not an awful lot written about it. Thank you for existing. Thank you for existing. A petition should be made to create a great audiobook of the Tale of Adanel, or better. Well, animation. Yeah, animation. I wish we had more animation for Tolkien, but I probably could get Phil Dragash to do the Tale of Adanel as an audiobook. Because I've commissioned him to do some narration for the channel in the past. It'd be quite a commission to do that, though. I think it'd be quite a big project. But I think that'd be quite nice to hear. Oh, sorry, I didn't see a super chat come in. Thanks, that's all. Thank you very much. Did I miss another one? Oh, I did. Well, thank you very much, Dom, and to Ben, who's telling me to hydrate. Yes, I'm going to hydrate, so I'll be back. Right, I'm back. Wait. Okay. Did Tolkien have a concrete idea of what everlasting darkness was in the Oath of Feanor? Wow, that's interesting because, as I've said before, Tolkien does oaths properly. I've not got the link. I really should bring the link to these streams, but there's a great post or website where a guy goes through medieval oaths and ancient oaths, how they're properly worded and what you swear on, and who's to punish you if you betray your oath and all of that. And the Oath of Feanor is a proper oath. There's consequences. There's figures greater than yourself that you're calling on to witness and to punish you and everything, and even referencing Eru is such a huge deal. But anyway, the everlasting darkness, even though it's words spoken by Feanor, he would mean what he was saying. And I suppose you could interpret it as, when we think of an everlasting darkness, you could think of a void. Maybe he's what a punishment that would be for an elf, especially. No Mandos, no return to life. You're cast out, which could be the case, because if I think of Eru and an everlasting darkness, it's kind of like when you think of Lucifer being cast out or something, and he's not somewhere hot. He's actually in a very cold place, furthest from the light of heaven. That's so I kind of think of that with that everlasting darkness. It's as if it's like we'll be punished by being so far away from the grace of Eru or something like that. That would be the ultimate punishment, wouldn't it? It's you're so far you're so far away from God, and that's a huge kind of punishment that makes sense in the context of the Oath of Feanor. It's the biggest punishment you could get. It's not death. He's not calling on death if he doesn't do it. It's everlasting darkness, which is arguably a fate worse than death in the Legendarium, anyway. Phil is awesome. I've not used them in a while because I started just narrating everything myself, but I like the narration that he provided. And I had a little list of different parts of the Silmarillion that I'd lined up for him to do. And I've not done it yet, but he probably would if I went back and commissioned him for it. He still takes commissions. But it was great because I'd maybe let the members hear this, but when he would record the stuff for me, he would do it in like 3 different ways, which I thought was quite interesting. So like the one I really liked was the Fingolfin Morgoth confrontation, and the 3 readings were so good. They were all done in like different ways that I actually just kind of took parts from each of them to make the final narration that you hear in that video. And he's definitely very talented. He's way better at narrating stuff than I am. I get too nervous on the mic, but he's like an actual voice talent and all that. And you know, even though some mistakes in the Lord of the Rings ones that he does, some pronunciations and all this, I'd still way rather listen to these soundscapes than the Andy Serkis ones. I don't like them. I tried it, and he talks slower than I do. What's all this? Sierra literally makes up quotes and attributes them to Tolkien, then gets upset when challenged on it. There's one thing I think, who was it? Someone. Oh, it was me. I'm about to say somebody else did it. I'm sure I watched something that he did, Q&A or something like that. And no, again, I think I've only watched a couple of videos, but there was something that stood out, and he quoted something to make his point, but it was from a website, and it wasn't a Tolkien quote at all. It was absolutely nothing to do with Tolkien, but it was used as a basis for the whole argument, which means that the whole argument falls flat. But I think I actually left a comment. I think that's the only comment I've left on the channel, and it didn't get responded to, I don't think. But yeah, if you're going to quote Tolkien, if you're searching online for the quotes, it's very handy having the book to just jump to the page and look at it. There's a lot of quotes that go around that aren't actually Tolkien, but I'm struggling to remember. There was something where it was like, it was a big point getting made, and the quote was up, and I don't remember that quote from anywhere, and it's because Tolkien never wrote that, and that's a bit of a blunder. But I don't think he got upset when challenged. I don't think he responded to me. But I have seen a couple of moments in the kind of group streams where it almost seems like they're arguing with each other. There's a lot of talk going on about Caesar and stuff. What's going on here? Círdan had this incredible foresight. Wouldn't that make Morgoth or Sauron envious too? A layer of mockery of this link to Manwë or Eru himself. It doesn't take much to make those figures envious, though. You know, it's almost like Morgoth or Sauron act like Eru's not involved. Eru's not really doing much, but they're still they know he exists, and they know they can't be as great as him, and that they're not lost to him, but they don't bask in his light anymore or anything like that. And yeah, like I said, it wouldn't take much at all to make these figures envious. But just when you're talking about Círdan, yeah, Círdan's got incredible foresight, and Elrond as well. We can't forget Elrond when it comes to that, and Galadriel in her way, even she maybe blinds herself to it sometimes, but Elrond and Círdan, that's where it's at. Yeah, just what you're saying there. I didn't see your comment. Felt disconnected to Eru. Seeing someone like Círdan having it must have annoyed him. Again, everything would annoy him, but yeah, it's like this kind of insight. But Sauron's egotistical, prideful enough that he determines what action to take. He looks for his own wisdom. Sauron probably wouldn't want insight into something that didn't come from himself. That he probably inherited that from Melkor. It's like, I want to follow my own path, and I'm wise and I know the right way. Figures like Círdan and Elrond, everything, they are far more open to the being gifted in some way by someone greater. Melkor thinks he's the greatest, and it's that's why these are the fallen figures. When it comes to layers of mockery, Morgoth mocking the connection between the Valar and elves men with his connection to orcs. It's under discussed. Or the orcs in general, the orcs described as the biggest mockery to Eru. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole they're corrupted elves thing, which, as I said earlier, I don't really buy, but the nature of orcs themselves, they're one of the mockeries of something that was created by Eru. The Valar love elves especially because they had no part in their making, and they see them as living, breathing other creations from their creator. Why wouldn't they love them? And then Melkor is like, well, I've got a great idea. I'll make or twist or whatever something that's a complete mockery of them. They're a kind of debased life form of corruption. And this idea of not just the creation of them, but their free will or the lack of as well. Seeing Morgoth in their mind's eye all the time, being completely dominated, being passed to Sauron later. It's like a complete corrupted existence, and I think that's clearly why Tolkien would describe him as it's like the biggest insult and mockery to Eru. But if Tolkien's describing Eru as the all-living God and everything, that they still get incorporated in some way into the plan, and he doesn't just like destroy them. And it's quite funny because you think about it in a way, if Eru did just outright destroy orcs or something like that, would Melkor not think in some way he'd kind of won to have Eru react in such a way? It probably still annoyed Melkor that Eru let orcs exist. That's just how twisted Melkor is. He does that regularly. Oh, the scholar. To me, it kind of means if you're finding quotes that aren't Tolkien or whatever, it kind of seems to me then that you're looking at what someone else has written to back up things that you're then saying, which is fine, right? There's some essays that I like and all that are written by other people. They're very interesting reads. There's people that are way better at doing all that than I am, and I like reading this stuff. But when I'm doing a video or something, it's like, well, I've got an idea. I want to write about that. I know where quotes are that I can go and look. I usually know the books I have to go to for quotes for certain things. And I don't think I've ever quoted anything that wasn't Tolkien. It seems weird to me that that's possible, and I just think that means you're not researching stuff yourself, and or you're not doing due diligence. I think if you've got something you really want to talk about, sure, you'd know where to go and find it. I don't know if everyone's like that, but I wouldn't go to Google and be like, I'll see what someone else has written about that first. Yeah, that's just what I'm like, though. Speaking of quotes, have you seen the Digital Tolkien project? It's a tool a bunch of academics are making for quoting and doing data analytics on Tolkien's works. Yes, and it used to, when I was on Twitter, I hated it, right? But I was on it. I used to follow the Digital Tolkien project. He followed me. He unfollowed me, though. I think he didn't. He either didn't like me arguing with certain folk from the Tolkien Society, because I think he's part of that as well, or he didn't like me saying stuff about Rings of Power. It was one of them, and he unfollowed. But that's a good site, and he's also an editor on Tolkien Gateway. I'm a very minor editor on there, but he's part of that as well. And I think Tolkien Gateway is implementing the Digital Tolkien project into their own reference system, which is a really good one. The Tolkien Gateway is great for if you're adding something on it and you want to reference. It's got a great system for doing that. But they're adding this new one, which I don't know if it's fully fledged yet, but it's the Digital Tolkien one. So it will really, really pinpoint where something you referenced is. Because for people who don't know, the Digital Tolkien project, you can type in like Narya, for example, and for a select list of the books, it will show you, chapter where it's mentioned. And then I think even recently it's kind of pinpointing the line, I think. I've not used it in a little while. But yeah, that's a brilliant tool. I think that's one of the reasons why that Tolkien Society very often awards him the best online resource, something like that. I find that a very valuable and inspiring piece of kind of scholarship and an academic resource for Tolkien. I think that's how quickly you'd be able to do research on certain things using that is, I can't overestimate how important that could be. And still some people wouldn't use it, they'll just rip off other people, but that's another story. So yeah, check them out. They have a YouTube channel. I didn't know they had a YouTube channel. I can't remember the guy's name. There's a guy that runs it. I can't remember. But he's on the Tolkien Gateway Discord with me as well. I think he's just called Digital Tolkien Project on that, though. I can't remember his name. But yeah, check it out. If you're even just curious, people, go and type in something to it and you'll see how good it is. I wonder if Melkor created orcs in the way that Ali created dwarves, and that Eru gave them life as was foretold in the music. Well, I typically view orcs that way. That's just the way I read it. So, for people who don't know, Ali made dwarves is probably the proper way to say it, where they would obey his commands, and if they weren't commanded to do anything, they would just be puppets. They would just not do anything. And Eru asked, why did you do that? And he was eager for the children to rise as elves and men who were made by Eru, but they hadn't awoken yet. And it was a fall for Aule, but from a position of good. And Eru, maybe we're talking about like kind of Abraham and Isaac kind of thing here, but Eru let Aule almost destroy them because he wanted to make up for his mistake, but they all cowered. They all wanted to kind of shield themselves and not be destroyed, which in that moment meant that they had been given life, a spark of life, the flame imperishable. And that's great. But for orcs, Melkor had this thing that a lot of people don't really talk about. He had the gift of subcreation. Certain members of the Ainur have this. It's you have the ability to make for your designs, and it kind of goes through to elves and men in a way where they can use the materials of the world to make things themselves. That's how the Silmarils can be made and everything like that. But if we're going up higher to the Ainur, certain figures among them, it's on a kind of larger scale. And I think it's entirely possible if you want to view orcs as being like dwarves. That's fine. But I would disagree with the last part. I think, unless you're saying, I think you are saying gave life in the same way that he gave life to dwarves, which I don't agree with, because that would be giving them the soul, which is the huge debate for Tolkien, as we know. We don't know if orcs had souls, and that caused a huge fuss for Tolkien and the nature of orcs, which is a shame. I'd have liked it to have been settled in some way. But I kind of view it more as he could have made orcs in that same way, but Eru allowed them to exist, but didn't grant them souls or whatever. And in a way, that kind of means it's kind of a shame, because if they've got this tortured, horrible existence, if they're soulless, are they actually suffering for it? This is the kind of stuff that Tolkien would have been thinking of, and that's why he didn't have a final answer to it. But yeah, I don't know, because if Eru gave them the flame perishable, they're then capable of independent thought and rebellion against their own maker, who would have been Melkor, but they never really did. And Eru would be giving them souls and life to then have a horrible existence where they could not get out from under the thumb of a Dark Lord who completely overwhelmed them. It's, as you see, I can't answer it because Tolkien himself couldn't, so what am I going to do? Tolkien Society. Oh, did I get to? Well, okay. I'll give my thoughts on the Tolkien Society, right? I want to say, though, I used to be a member of it for a little while, and I'm not criticising anyone who's a member of the Tolkien Society. There's like 3,000 members or something like that. There'll be plenty of people who like my stuff who are part of it and all that. So I'm not saying anything like that. It's just, as usual, it's like certain people, certain attitudes, this kind of ego that goes with it is, I don't like it when No, like earlier I was saying I don't like people calling themselves scholars and that. That's just personal, right? But an overinflated sense of importance is another thing, right? Like, there's not been arrogant here, but there's quite a few people really like my channel and they've given me huge praise and everything, and I don't really take it well, mostly because I don't really know how to take it. But I hope I never declare myself as like the biggest Tolkien expert. No chance, right? I just love Tolkien and talking about it and writing about it and all that. But there are those out there who um, have, like, as part of the Tolkien Society, quite high up in it, disregarded things that I've said or an opinion I've shared because I've got a YouTube channel or something like that, and I find that really weird. As if what I have to say, because I'm not just writing it, but I'm putting it into words in a video, makes it shallow or something. And yeah, there are shallow YouTube channels, plenty of them, that talk about Tolkien, that they are just basically reading Tolkien Gateway to you. But there are others that really like it, a kind of level where they want to share their thoughts on it and everything. And it's not fair to say everyone's the same and it's all shallow content just for money. But yeah, there are those that disregarded what I said. People who were quite high up in it who didn't like that I didn't like Rings of Power, that kind of thing. And someone blocked me from it on Twitter again because I refused to accept responsibility for racist people who were saying stuff about actors and Rings of Power and stuff. And I don't just mean there should be no black elves, something. I'm saying the stuff they were saying was kind of hideous language and everything, right? But someone said because I had a YouTube channel that I had a responsibility to tell them not to be like that. And I said, that's not my responsibility at all. That's nothing to do with me. I'm not responsible for what other people say, and I can only control what I say. And they didn't like that. And I think the chair, very weird interactions with him where do you remember I've been on their podcast like a couple of years ago, the Melon Heads. I think I was talking about that war. They were here and they invited me on to talk about that. And do you remember that whole thing on Twitter where they posted the photo of Tolkien, and the Tolkien Society said, do you have permission to use that photo? That was a big thing. That I took exception to that, right? Because the guy behind the Tolkien Society would do the same thing. Like this, that really bothered me. So he pounced on this podcast. You've no permission to use that photo and stuff, right? So no matter the legality of that, right? The point is this person would do the same thing, but would claim that it was fair use. And I'm like, that's not fair use. What you're claiming is fair use is exactly the same way they could claim it was fair use. It was just, I don't want to get into huge deals about it, but it was such a weird kind of debate, right? But then when I was making this point to the guy, he basically started disregarding it because I didn't follow him on Twitter. Again, that's such a weird attitude. Like, this is a kind of echo chamber thing. It's like this safe space where I want to be able to say something and then all my followers will agree and we're all happy and dance in circles. And if someone comes in from the outside and says something different, it's like an attack. And he blocked me for pointing that out. the chair of the Tolkien Society blocked me, right? But at the same time, the editor of Amon Hen was emailing me saying that, well, thanks for the 6 kind of articles, or I don't know what I'd call them, just my writing. It's like, thanks for sending them in. No, we've printed 2 of them and we're going to use 4 over the next 4 months, whatever, and put them in. And I was just like, well, that's so weird. Because, so it actually says to them, your chairman blocked me for having an opinion, but you at the same time are saying we're going to put your writing in our magazine that he edits. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. So it makes me sound really petty, but I was like, delete all the stuff I've sent you and don't print anything again, and delete my membership. I don't want to be a member. A paying member of something where the chairman blocked me on Twitter, right, for absolutely nothing. Again, it sounds really petty, but you become kind of petty if you're dealing with other petty folk. And yeah, it's that, and their weird attitude to their conferences where people were like, can we maybe talk about, there's loads of cool stuff you could talk at conferences about Tolkien, and they were getting really political with it, and anyone who just basically said, could we possibly talk about something like this, we just get pounced on, and I just can't be bored with that. I'm not really into drama and stuff, and I was like, I'd rather just not pay for the membership and not bother with it. But anyway, that's the gist of my criticism of it. Again, out of 3,498 members, I probably have a problem with about 5 of them, but they tend to be pretty important members. Everyone else seems pretty cool. What's all this stuff about Serbian literature? So fundamentally, Sauron was unhappy with the role assigned to him by Iluvatar, turning to Melkor for more stature, pride, and power. Well, I know you've asked Patricia that, but I just wanted to jump in, give an opinion. It's Sauron, right? He disliked kind of friction, opposition, and he wanted to fulfill his designs as quickly as possible. And that's actually the goal of all these creators, and the Ainur. It's, if you have a design that you were imagining in the music of the Ainur, and then you see it brought into a vision, and then you descend into the world to actually make it a real thing, it must be really fulfilling and great to see that happen. Sauron liked that, and it's actually a good motive. Like, Tolkien actually says the origins of these motives, that it's actually a good thing that Sauron wanted a design to be fulfilled quickly and with no friction. So, as with everything else, Melkor kind of turns this into some kind of corruptive version of it, where he would give Sauron that authority and power, so to speak, to do what he wanted and have his designs fulfilled, and there'd be no friction, there'd be no argument against it. And Sauron loved that, and he was corrupted. And then, like I was saying earlier, with these makers, your Sarumans and your Saurons, he treated individual wills like he would treat a tree that could be felled. It's like, it was no different. There were materials that he could organize how he wanted. And this authority had been given to him by Melkor, which was above his station. It was above what he should have been doing. He then started to be able to fulfill his designs quickly, even if that included wills that he had no right to dominate. And it was this, again, I said it earlier as well, we're talking about men, someone with power deciding more of it. And then Sauron actually did get it. And we even see that when Melkor falls and Sauron's a bit kind of scared. And no, he's not committing atrocities for a little while. And he has some good motives, and he kind of comes back into the world. But he just quickly falls to it again. It's as if he's so used to being able to move pieces on a board himself. And he has this opinion that as someone powerful and wise, he has a right to do with others as he pleases, because what he does in the end is going to be best for them. It's the best decision because he has the power and authority. It's a really corrupt ideology. But that's what Sauron's like. And it started from being corrupted by Melkor and then inheriting that throne from him and being so used to getting his way and seeing everyone as being weaker. Melkor wasn't there anymore. Sauron was the greatest one left, and he would then do what he wanted. And yeah, I don't know about the role assigned to him by Iluvatar, because it's more they're all free beings. Like the Ainur have free will as well, and they can do what they want. Now, they are free to fall, but it's more Melkor could offer him gifts that he wasn't getting in his original position, basically. As Church says here, motivation was to have order. Orders. We're talking about order and chaos. The no friction, designs fulfilled immediately to his will. That's exactly what we're talking about. And Melkor actually allowed Sauron to do it in a grand scale. This is fundamentally engraved into him, but he had perfect order in Aman. There must be more to him. We don't even know if Sauron was ever in Aman, to be honest. Remember, you had Ahriman and a symmetrical Arda and everything, and Melkor destroyed the lamps and the Valar fled, all that good stuff. And they created Aman by dwelling in this western region. It became the Blessed Realm because of their presence, but it's not really written anywhere that Sauron was actually there. We don't know. That's an interesting thought, but so he arguably had perfect order, if you're talking about, at a time before Melkor disrupted the order. But wouldn't someone who still wanted order want to fix that? But that's the thing. It's that perfect order you're talking about is not the perfect order of Sauron. It's by the designs of others. It's the exact same reason that Melkor can't accept creations that aren't his. He wants that power of creation. He wants to order things himself. Things that are made by others aren't his, so he loathes them and he wants to control them. And then when he can't control them, he wants to destroy them. He wants to do everything, break up Ea to its atoms and rebuild it in what he wants. It's that real kind of satanic kind of fall. So Sauron wanting order, we're really saying he wants order to his own will, and he would accept a destructive force like Melkor, who would destroy, if it gave him the opportunity to order things by his designs. No, that's how I read Sauron anyway. Yeah, it's funny how basically every community has drama, even when it's chill as Tolkien. That's the thing. I don't like it, but there's I think this Rings of Power made it a whole lot worse. This idea of you're all in or you're all out. There's no nuance. It's why you have I like Reddit, and I go on to Tolkien fans all the time. The Lord of the Rings one's fine as well. But there's these ones that always pop up. You get like Lord of the Rings on Prime, and that's like the fellowship of fans, super fans. Rings of Power is the best thing ever kind of group, where if you say anything negative, and I'm talking about from quite valid, interesting criticism down to the horrible stuff that should get downvoted, it all gets downvoted. You're just a hater, a gatekeeper, whatever. And then you get the other subreddit that's called Rings of Power, and it's almost like the opposite. If you go in there wanting some random fans found it and goes, "Oh, I really like Rings of Power," and they get downvoted into oblivion, and then they just all start crossing over and they're saying, "Oh, you're shills, you're haters," and it's like, there's no nuance to it at all. It's like, I'm sure a lot of you agree. It's, you either really hate that show and you see it as an insult, or you love it and you think that everyone who criticizes it has got nefarious reasons for doing it. And I can't remember the last time I read a comment from someone who just thought, I thought it was all right. It wasn't great, but it was all right. I can't remember the last time I read that. It's all or nothing with Rings of Power, and I think it's made this, if we're calling it a community, or it's worse, because there's even channels that I know for a fact don't like Rings of Power who make videos about it, and it's drives views, engagement, drama. Even, a video of you loving Rings of Power won't do as well as one where you're hating it. The drama gets the arses and the seats. Jesus, after midnight. I'll need to finish up soon. Great answer to that question. Thank you. Perhaps orcs have animation under their master, but they do not actually have souls and agency. Not knowing the answer is what makes Middle-earth lore so enduring. Yes, I agree. And but they're even more confusing, because when Melkor, well, I suppose you could explain this away. When Melkor is cast out of the physical world through the Door of Night, the orcs don't all stop moving, but you could kind of twist things around to kind of explain that and say Morgoth's presence is still in the world because of Morgoth's ring. He's just not in direct control of it anymore, or something like that. But this is one of the things, though, that Tolkien's morality and faith and everything was really messing with orcs. And I think I would have liked an answer to it, even though the debate's interesting and that it's that struggle that he was going through to explain it. I wish he came to some conclusion, but it does leave these really interesting, hard to explain beings, but they're so prevalent through all the stories that it's like you'd like to know a little bit more about them, but they are kind of unknowable. It's just, some people out there reading it will see them as creatures with souls that when they die in the end, if they have like the kind of religious view, they will in the end be saved anyway. So it's almost like I don't go for this, but it's like they have that temporary suffering on Earth through the corruption of Melkor, but they'll be redeemed in the end. But I do kind of view the Nazgul that way. I think they're still men, and when the ring's destroyed, they'll be redeemed some way because they have to be. They'll dwell in the halls for a time, maybe a long time, and eventually surrender to Eru. But with orcs, we just don't know, and it's some people have that view, which they probably see as optimistic, but I think that's quite cruel to think of that they'd be given souls just to have a miserable existence until they pass out of existence or wherever they go. Okay, a few more before I go. I do have work in the morning. I didn't realize I've been here for over 3 hours. I'm nearly like that Philosopher's Games channel, 6-hour stream to talk about Rings of Power trailers. There's a question there that I wanted to... I've actually got a copy of that. It's with the Alan Lee illustrations. So yeah, I've read that, and that obviously influenced even like the Arthurian kind of legend, which I've read a lot of as well. And Norse sagas, yep, definitely. Quite familiar with them. And I think the early Legendarium especially, yes, you can learn about the world building, some of the mysteries that were placed that didn't explain, and some of the more fantastical elements. You can definitely see it. And even if we're talking about I know it's not analogous to it, I'm not saying that, but the dark elves, light elves, trees, talking about like Yggdrasil and all this, there's definitely influence there. Dwarf names, Gandalf, there's loads, right? And I think it's interesting to read this stuff and know about it, because you can then start to see how things later kind of changed when Tolkien's own faith started being included. It's not even just like Norse sagas. If you go to like classical mythology, and there's more influences, but then as the Legendarium progresses, you can start to see the Christian elements coming into it. And I think it's another thing that as he moved away from this mythology for England idea, and it was like a real world alternate history kind of thing, you can actually start to see these older mythologies make way for a kind of Christian one. I find that all really interesting. And yeah, not just like names and little references like that, but there's stories and events that happened that, like all good mythologies, are found in just about all of them. It's not a complete unique mythology, and that's what I like about it as well. It's there's a reason why people from all different parts of the world had their own mythologies, but some of these stories are almost the same. It's Tolkien was like an expert at kind of crafting that as well for his own, but I'd highly recommend people getting into that stuff as well. Sorry, while you're still streaming. Yeah, I don't know why. I should go to bed. I'll go at 3.5 hours. Let's make it we're talking about Sauron liking order. I like it as well. 3.5 hours will do. And then I'll have to go. Here's an interesting thought. If Tolkien didn't write it, it's not Tolkien. If you're talking about j.r.r. Tolkien, j.r.r. Tolkien, there is Tolkien that's not written by Tolkien. The Ruin of Doriath and that kind of thing. If you read the history of Middle Earth and you start getting into the editing, the unbelievable editing requirements of the Silmarillion, how it was pieced together and how certain things were left out that should have been included, and little bits. Christopher was kind of careful with it, but Guy Gabriel Kay was involved, and there was text actually written that wasn't written by j.r.r. Tolkien that is in the Silmarillion. So, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but there's people out there that you would bring up something from History of Middle Earth and say, oh, that doesn't count, Tolkien didn't write it. But they'll defend something in the Silmarillion that Tolkien didn't write. It's quite complex, but I know what you're meaning. You're talking about like a video game or Rings of Power or something that 99.9% of what's written in it is written by somebody else. So is it Tolkien? I don't think Rings of Power is Tolkien. I think it's influenced by it. There's certain events that are events in Tolkien, and they'll invent the plot to get to those points. But you reach a point where you think, what makes something Tolkien then? If I explained to you the plot of Macbeth and you adapted that, the story of Macbeth, is that Shakespearean? I don't think so. You have to read the text, don't you? It's not just about the plot, it's about the writing. And that's, when we were joking earlier about me doing a huge video about Rings of Power and stuff, that's what I would be talking about most of all these people arguing about whether it's Tolkien or not. I'm like, what does that mean? And to me, it's not just a plot. Tolkien's more than just a story. It's the writing, the feel of it, the world building. And it can't really be just faked, kind of plastic TV show. The funny thing about people being elitist towards you regarding YouTube is that I suspect Tolkien would have been yeah, probably. We have to remember Tolkien was like old, right? And died quite a while ago, and there's a lot of things that people talk about, like what would Tolkien think of the Peter Jackson movies and that, and then people get all defensive if someone says he'd probably hated them, right? And they think that by Tolkien disliking something, that means that they're not allowed to like it or something. It's not that at all. I don't agree with every opinion Tolkien held or something. Just because I really love his writing doesn't mean I see him as a god or something like that. It's he probably would have disliked it. Maybe. No, I always thought he'd hate like fan clubs and that, and he didn't really. He'd go and drink beer with them and stuff. So imagine Tolkien was alive and actually liked your YouTube channel. That'd be the biggest endorsement ever. He'd still say Broken Sword were plagiarists, though. Oh, yeah. The same happened to the Orcs when Sauron saw the ring was at Mount Doom. They stopped having a will of their own. Yeah, that it's interesting what you're saying. It's if Sauron. I thought someone was breaking into my house there. If Sauron was gathering orcs to Mordor and focusing his will on evil being drawn to him, when he doesn't focus his will entirely on them, what do they do? And you kind of see that when, in a moment when he realizes where the ring is and what's happening, he's absolutely terrified. And it's almost not that they've stopped having a will of their own. Imagine the figure that is basically a god to you, who's so focused on projecting that will onto you, empowering you in some way. Imagine that figure immediately becomes terrified and turns his attention to something else, and you would act like the orcs do. They don't know what to do, and they're all terrified and scattered. I think that's what's going on there. And then, of course, when the ring is destroyed, everything that was made by the ring is undone, and many of the orcs kill themselves. Like they're mad, and others hide, and it's just chaos because they're, like I said, it's essentially like a god. Their god king has been removed from them. It's just how I imagined what happened with orcs when Melkor was executed and cast out. The orcs survived, but it must have been absolutely frightening for them because this figure that they had seen, like I said earlier, in their mind's eye was gone, and it's the most terrifying thing that could happen to them. It's like an existential crisis. So we're almost there, folks. From a mistake, making a member stream public, 3.5 hours later, I'm about to finish. Have I got one more thing to look at? No, I think that's it. So, thanks for everyone who visited, those who stayed the whole time. Like I said, it was by accident, this, but I'll go through the painstaking process of time-stamping everything. And this stream was actually meant to be like, I was going to do my next public one in September, but this will count. I was going to do one every 3 months, but this will count as that one. And it was very impromptu. Like I said, it was a mistake, so I didn't have any questions prepared or whatever, but hopefully you enjoyed me answering all your questions. There was a lot of good ones, and I appreciate it very much, especially since I'm not posting a lot of videos for various reasons. So seeing so many people show up was pretty cool out of the blue. So I'll wrap up and hope you do watch the next video or come to the next stream. And you can join very cheaply as a member if you do want to come to the member ones. But yeah, it was fun, and I will see if we've got a little outro here. Have I got an outro? I'll do the countdown as the outro. So thanks again, everyone. I'm away to my bed, and I'll see you all later.